Every empire believes its power is eternal, till the day it discovers that money remembers what armies forget. History often tells us that wars are won by generals, that revolutions are born in the streets, and that empires fall because of kings and presidents. But sometimes history moves in quieter rooms, rooms filled with ledgers instead of weapons, rooms where decisions are made not with rage but with memory. This is the story of a man who never commanded an army, never ruled a nation, and yet helped humiliate one of the largest empires on earth. A Jewish banker who decided that dignity was worth more than forgiveness, and who chose revenge not with bullets but with capital. At the center of this story stands a bold and unsettling idea that financial power, when guided by moral outrage and strategic patience, can reshape the fate of nations. That persecution can plant the seeds of retaliation in unexpected places. And that history's most devastating blows are sometimes delivered without a single shot being fired by the person responsible. To understand how this happened, we must return to a world ruled by crowns and cruelty. 19th century Europe was a continent split by wealth and misery, by modern ambition and ancient hatred. Empires stretched across borders, yet inside them, millions lived as outsiders. Among them were Jewish communities tolerated when useful, despised when convenient, and punished when fear demanded a scapegoat. In the Russian Empire, anti-Semitism was not an accident. It was policy. Jews were confined to the Pale of Settlement, barred from professions, denied education, and subjected to sudden violent pogroms that could erupt without warning. Homes burned, lives shattered, and the state looked away or worse, encouraged it. Far from the blood-soaked streets of Odessa and Kishinev, another world existed. A world of marble offices, international cables, and financial markets that moved faster than any army. It was here in New York that Jacob Schiff built his life. Schiff was not born into power. He was born into memory. His family traced its roots back through generations of German Jews who understood what it meant to survive by adapting, by learning, and by never forgetting who held the keys to safety. From a young age, Schiff absorbed two lessons. That knowledge was protection, and that money, properly used, could command respect in a world that offered little mercy. When he arrived in America, he found a nation full of opportunity and contradiction. The United States promised freedom, yet whispered its own prejudices. Schiff learned quickly how to navigate both. He studied finance with obsessive discipline, mastering the invisible mechanics of trust, credit, and leverage. He spoke softly, dressed modestly, and listened more than he spoke. Power, he understood, did not need to announce itself. By the time he became a senior partner at Kuhn, Loeb, and Co., Jacob Schiff was no longer simply a banker. He was a gatekeeper. Railroads, governments, and industries depended on his approval. His signature could unlock fortunes or quietly deny them. And while his success was American, his heart never left the suffering of his people abroad. Each report from Russia hardened something inside him. Each pogrom confirmed his belief that morality without consequence was meaningless. The Russian government wanted Western capital. It wanted legitimacy. It wanted to modernize its railways, fund its military, and borrow from the very world it brutalized behind its borders. Schiff made a decision that would echo across continents. He would not fund oppression, and more than that, he would make sure others knew why. For years, he quietly blocked Russian loans in the United States. No speeches, no headlines, just closed doors and polite refusals. Wall Street noticed. So did St. Petersburg. But the real turning point came in 1904, when Russia marched into war against an unlikely enemy, Japan. The Russo-Japanese War was supposed to be a formality. A European empire crushing an Asian power. That was the assumption. But assumptions are dangerous things when money chooses sides. Japan needed capital to sustain the war. Western banks were hesitant. The risk was enormous. The racial prejudice of the era whispered that Japan would fail. But Jacob Schiff saw something else. He saw a chance. He believed that if Russia lost not diplomatically, not symbolically, but publicly, would shatter the myth of its invincibility. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would force the empire to look inward at the rot it had allowed to grow. Schiff helped arrange massive loans for Japan, using his reputation and network to legitimize what others feared. It was a calculated gamble, and it worked. Japan won. Russia was humiliated. For the first time in modern history, a European empire had been defeated by an Asian nation. The shockwaves were immediate. Inside Russia, unrest exploded. The war exposed incompetence, corruption, and weakness. Revolutions simmered. Abroad, observers began asking uncomfortable questions about the true sources of power. Schiff did not celebrate publicly. He never framed his actions as revenge. But privately, he was clear. This was accountability. This was consequence. This was a message written not in blood, but in balance sheets. And yet with influence comes distortion. Rumors spread. Anti-Semites seized the moment, twisting reality into conspiracy. They claimed Jewish bankers controlled wars, manipulated nations, pulled strings from shadows. These lies would prove as enduring as they were dangerous. Schiff himself became a symbol, admired by some, hated by others, misunderstood by many. To Jewish communities, he was a defender. To Russian authorities, an enemy. To history, a paradox. Because Schiff was not driven by cruelty. He funded hospitals, universities, and charities. He championed education and integration. He believed deeply in democracy and restraint. And yet, he had chosen to use the machinery of global finance to strike back at a government that had tormented his people. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because it forces us to ask a question we rarely want to confront. When does justice become vengeance? When does resistance become retaliation? And who gets to decide? Russia would eventually fall to revolution. The old regime collapsed, replaced by a system that promised equality and delivered new forms of terror. Anti-Semitism did not vanish. It merely changed its language. Jacob Schiff did not live to see how his legacy would be weaponized by extremists who twisted history to justify hatred. He died believing he had acted morally within the limits of his conscience. Whether history agrees remains an open question. Today his name is barely known outside academic circles. Yet his story lingers in the architecture of modern power. In the understanding that capital is not neutral, that silence can be complicity, that even those who never raise their voice can still shake the world. The irony is haunting. A man who sought dignity for his people became a figure used to demonize them. A banker who opposed oppression became a character in conspiracy myths. History, it seems, has a cruel sense of symmetry, and perhaps that is the final lesson. That power is never just about strength. It is about memory, about who remembers pain and what they choose to do with it. About how the quiet decisions made in safe rooms can echo louder than cannons. Empires fall. Fortunes dissolve. Hatred adapts. But choices remain. And long after the ledgers are closed and the wars are forgotten, history still whispers the same. Question: what would you do if the only weapon you had was influence, and the cost of doing nothing was silence? The screen fades to black, and for a moment the world feels uncomfortably quiet.